Welcome to the Billboard Mastery Podcast, where you will learn the correct way to identify, evaluate, negotiate, perform due diligence on, select the construction type, build, rent the ad space, and operate billboard signs. And now, here is your host, the guy that built from scratch the largest privately owned billboard company in Dallas-Fort Worth, Frank Rolfe.
There's an old adage that you only live once. And as far as we know, that's pretty much true. And we also know that the average human on Earth has a lifespan of roughly around 80 years, based on a lot of issues, your genetics, and whether you smoke, whether you drink, your weight, all kinds of things like that. And if we all say, well, let's see, I've got about 80 years on Earth to get what I want out of it, what that tells you is we're all under some kind of timer, some kind of biological clock. And the problem you have in life is you're always racing up against that limitation. And if you don't get what you want in life, well, you pretty much ultimately, you time out. You run out of time. You see this sometimes on shows like American Ninja Warrior or even the old Wipeout show on TV. There's some parts of the contest which are not timed, and there's others that are timed. The pressure's off when they're not timed. You run the obstacle course at whatever speed you want. You want to rest for a moment? No problem. You want to kind of go slow and tedious to make sure you don't lose your grip? Well, that's fine too. But on the ones where it's timed, it's very stressful because you don't have that flexibility. If you don't get there by a certain point in time, you lose. So the whole time you're racing and racing and racing because gosh darn it, I want to be a winner. So what does it mean when you talk about timing out? It simply means you're running out of that precious resource of time. So how can all of us do a better job with the time we have to accomplish the task of, in this case, buying or building a billboard? Well, the first thing you have to do is set the parameters of what you're trying to achieve. What are the parameters of the billboard you're trying to do? Where is it going to be geographically? How much are you willing to spend? How much capital do you have? How much time do you want to devote? What's the goal of the whole thing anyway? Side hustle, build a career, build an empire. Really, it's up to you to decide what are we trying to achieve with the time that we have. And next, you got to understand that volume is the key to getting things done. So how do you come to grips with volume? Well, there's a book I read a while back by a guy named Joe Girard. He was the #1 car salesman in America back in the 70s. He wrote a book called You Can Sell Anything to Anybody. But if you read the book, it really wasn't so much about sales. He was the first guy to ever really scientifically approach volume regarding cars. He sold more used cars than anyone in American history. I think in a given year, he sold 2,000 or 3,000 cars or more by himself. Now, how did the guy do that? Well, he was an early pioneer of such items as direct mail. He was the guy sending out postcards when nobody else was, saying, interested in a car? Call Joe Girard. Here's my number. He also loved to cold call people. He would sometimes pick up a phone book and start cold calling people just saying, hey, are you in the market for a new car? Or he'd call up and he'd say, hey, we've got a special down here at the dealership. We've got this beautiful new Ford Mustang, and it's on a special for only $9,000. So he realized that volume was key. He said at one time really what it was like was loading up a Ferris wheel, and he realized that you never knew who was going to walk out of which car. It didn't really matter. As long as you had people in every car and you kept the thing going, they would all ultimately get out. So the trust was in the volume itself. He knew if he sent enough direct mail postcards out or made enough cold calls, he'd find someone to buy a car. He didn't know which one, but he just knew that's what would get him there. So that's the second component when you're trying to not time out is volume, embracing it, realizing you can achieve almost anything in life if you do it enough. Case in point, take a trash can. Take that trash can, put it at the opposite end of whatever room you're in, get a bunch of paper, wad it up into balls, and see if you can throw that ball into that trash can. I bet on the third or fourth attempt you can. Now let's make it harder. You say, well, okay, but this time it has to bank off 2 walls to go in the trash can. And maybe that takes you 7 or 8 attempts, but you know what? Bingo. Once again, you got it done. You can add on any permutation of difficulty, and with enough volume, you're going to still get that paper wad in that trash can if you have enough tries. So volume is very, very key. But you can't get anywhere with volume unless you know what you're doing. If you want to get in the billboard business, you've got to understand that thing that most Americans don't know. And that's the fact that billboards are federally regulated, both by the Highway Department under the good old original Highway Beautification Act, and then by every state in America adopting its own state sign law. Billboards can only be in certain zonings and with certain spacings. And pretty much every state is different on that. So you have to know in your state what the rules and regulations are. And then the city itself also has its own sign regulations. You got to learn what those are too. You got to not only know where the sign can go, but you also have to know how big it can be, how tall it can be. And you have to know all the loopholes and all those kinds of things that can really allow you to adjust and change and get away by pushing those ordinances that's fully legal, but that most people outside the industry have no idea about. Now, the fourth item, if you don't want to time out, is that you've got to, at all times, remember that you've got to get things to happen. It's called creative deal making. Anyone can be a deal killer. Anyone can look over any option and say, hey, you know what? I don't like this deal because of this item or that item. But you're going to time out if you're a deal killer. You'll never get any deals done. Instead, you've got to be a deal maker. You have to realize that despite all your efforts, your goals, understanding what you're doing, and using volume as a weapon, you still got to make things happen. If you're trying something within the billboard industry and it's not working for you, either fix it or come up with a different plan of how you're going to do it. I looked at a city once, great location, east of Dallas, but the billboard ordinance there only allowed for tiny little signs, 5 by 10 feet in size, 8 sheets. I couldn't build big signs, even though that was my forte. So I could have said, nah, I'm not going to build any signs in this market because, heck, I only do the big signs. But you know what? I would never have any signs because the city wouldn't allow you to do it. So instead I said, you know what? I'll build small signs. And it worked out really well because I was being a deal maker. I was creatively saying to myself, okay, how do I make this happen? Not how can I put it down? How can I kill it off? How can I decide to, escape all the work by just saying, it's not possible. You got to get out there and you got to be a deal maker. And billboards are absolutely no different. The bottom line to it is, don't time out. We're in a new year, the year of 2023. We're still in January. We have the whole year to go. So get in motion. Remember that when you die, typically on your deathbed, you're going to look back. You're only going to regret the things you didn't do more than the things that you did do. You're going to look back at potential opportunities and say, why didn't I do that? What was I waiting for exactly? Not realizing that the clock was ticking the entire time. This is Frank Roth, the Billboard Mastery Podcast. Hope you enjoyed this. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Billboard Mastery Podcast. Be sure to visit us at www.billboardmastery.com, where you can find past episodes of this show, plus an array of information to help you successfully build, buy, and operate billboard signs.